Imagine a continent with more than 60% of its 1.4 billion people under the age of 25, youthful, dynamic, brimming with innovation. By 2035, more young Africans will enter the workforce each year than in the rest of the world combined. A continent whose GDP is growing at nearly 4% a year, despite global headwinds. A continent where mobile money accounts have surpassed 1.1 billion registered users, leading the world in digital financial inclusion. Welcome to Africa in 2025, rising as never before. Today, Africa is rewriting the rules of geopolitics, challenging old hierarchies, and pushing the global south into a new era of power. But why is the West growing so nervous? Strap in, we're about to dive into Africa is Rising, Why the West is Nervous. Africa's economy is forecast to grow 3.8% in 2025, only slightly down from 4% in 2024, far above the global average. Over 60% of Africans are under 25, fueling unprecedented entrepreneurship and digital innovation. From billion-dollar startups sprouting across Nairobi's tech hubs to mass youth protests shaking up governments, Africa's renaissance is more than a headline. It's a geopolitical earthquake. By the end of this video, you'll see why Western capitals are scrambling to respond, and why you need to join the conversation right now. Let's dive deeper. Africa's demographic dividend is both its greatest asset and its biggest challenge. 2/3 of Africans live in cities now, driving consumer markets and creating a $2.6 trillion urban economy. Governments are racing to create jobs, build infrastructure, and reform policies to harness this youth bulge. Africa has impressive growth metrics. Senegal leads with 8.4% growth in 2025, Rwanda 7.1%, while Nigeria and South Africa lag at 3% and 1% respectively. However, there is an uneven recovery across regions. The sub-Saharan average is 3.8% but North Africa posts 4.5% growth. Added to this, commodity exporters face price volatility, whilst services hubs like Kenya and Ghana have diversified successfully. Additionally, there is a youth unemployment risks. Despite 10 to 12 million youth entering the workforce annually, only 3 million formal jobs are created each year, leaving 76 million NEETs, not in education, employment, or training. This young population is not waiting. They're innovating. From mobile money to tech hubs, Africa is rewriting the innovation playbook. Nairobi, Lagos, and Cape Town vie to be the next global startup capital. There's a mobile money revolution. Sub-Saharan Africa accounts for 1.1 billion registered mobile money accounts, over 2/3 of the global total. Safaricom's M-PESA alone serves 35.8 million active customers in Kenya, processing over 37 billion transactions annually. The startup funding surge. In 2022, African startups raised $3.3 billion, 55% more than the previous year, with over 633 deals, marking a 1,000% increase since 2015. Solar energy and green tech. Distributed solar installations doubled between 2021 and 2024, powering 20 million households and creating 500,000 direct jobs across the value chain. Source: IEA Africa report cited. Nairobi's Silicon Savannah isn't just a catchy nickname, it's reality. In the first half of 2025 alone, African startup funding soared past $1 billion, led by booming proptech and fintech deals in Egypt and South Africa. Egyptian firms raised over $330 million in May 2025, while South Africa captured 26% of total funding, proof that Africa's tech scene is maturing fast. But it's not just about money. Africa now boasts 9 unicorns, 8 of which are fintechs, demonstrating that digital finance is leapfrogging legacy banking systems across Lagos, Accra, and beyond. These startups are homegrown solutions tailored for African challenges: mobile payments, agri-tech, e-health. They'll drive inclusive growth for billions. Yet, many critics warn of over-reliance on foreign VC money. What happens when global markets tighten? Will these companies survive without Western capital? Are you investing in African tech? Drop a comment. Do you think African startups can thrive independently, or is outside investment a double-edged sword? The average age in sub-Saharan Africa is just 19. That's a generation wired for change, using social media, hashtags, and on-the-ground activism to challenge entrenched elites. Kenya's July 7 uprisings, Saba Saba Day, at least 31 protesters killed, 567 arrested over demands for accountability and jobs. Africa's youth are politically awakened. From Kenya's Saba Saba protests to Pan-African reparations campaigns, young Africans challenge the status quo. In Niger, the M62 movement has mobilized hundreds of thousands against neo-colonial interference. In Burkina Faso, President Traoré leans into Pan-African unity, declaring, "When the people stand up, imperialism trembles." Reparations and decolonization. At the UN Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, CARICOM and the African Union forged a global reparations fund, demanding justice for colonial and slavery-era crimes. Jamaica's petition to King Charles III has CARICOM's backing and will be presented at the Africa CARICOM Summit in October 2025. Pan-African Solidarity Networks online, digital platforms like TikTok and Twitter amplify calls for systemic change, #end bad governance trends across West Africa monthly. Analysis of social media trends. Across West and Central Africa, anti-imperialist rhetoric is surging. French military bases have become rallying points for protesters demanding an end to neo-colonial influence. Pan-Africanism. Today's 2025 declaration calls for ending imperialist aggression, echoing Sankara's vision of true sovereignty for all African peoples. This sentiment isn't just symbolic, it's fueling constitutional changes that strip France of military access and demand reparations. But can sweeping anti-Western stances coexist with the need for foreign aid and expertise? Some leaders warn of unintended economic fallout. Youth energy has toppled governments and forced foreign powers to rethink their strategies, proof that a united African youth front can reshape the continent. Yet, some fear these movements can be hijacked by radical factions, fueling instability rather than sustainable change. These movements unsettle Western governments and NGOs, challenging decades of conditional aid. Type "power to the youth" in the chat if you believe Africa's young generation will lead the next revolution. As Africa diversifies its partners, China, Russia, and new alliances reshape power dynamics, leaving the West scrambling. Chinese investment surge. 2024 saw 10 Chinese mining deals over $100 million, the most since 2013, targeting lithium, cobalt, and rare earths in Africa. Resource nationalism. Zimbabwe plans to ban raw lithium exports by 2027, Ghana and Rwanda investing in processing facilities to capture value domestically. U.S. pivot and security disengagement. AFRICOM's new directive emphasizes self-reliance, U.S. funding for WFP in West Africa cut by 80%, suspending aid in Mauritania and Mali. Russia and Wagner effect. Military juntas in Mali and Burkina Faso replaced French troops with Russian mercenaries, eroding France's influence. When France pulls back, Russia steps in. The Wagner Group's footprint in Mali, the CAR, and beyond has alarmed Western capitals. A Wagner-controlled gold mine in the Central African Republic saw 11 local youths gunned down, raising questions about human rights and sovereignty. Moscow's private military contractors offer security guarantees without political strings, appealing to regimes wary of Western conditionalities. Yet Wagner's brutality and shadow wars risk dragging African states into proxy conflicts, undermining long-term stability. Comment if you think Russia's influence is a problem, or if you believe it's a valid counterbalance to the West. China's Belt and Road Initiative is in overdrive. In the first half of 2025, Chinese contracts in Africa alone totaled $39 billion, record engagement to date. Beijing's approach of no-strings infrastructure, roads, railways, ports, clashes with Western models that tie aid to governance reforms. African economies are craving modern logistics. China delivers fast, cheap, and at scale, transforming mobility and trade. Critics warn of hidden debts. Will African governments end up ceding sovereignty over strategic assets when they can't repay? Do you trust China's Belt and Road Initiative projects, or fear they're a debt trap? Amid these shifts, Western governments express alarm, citing security risks, migration pressures, and lost markets. But are their fears justified? As new players surge in, the West is scrambling. The US is rethinking its Africa policy amid fears of losing influence in a multipolar world. Europe too is uneasy. Germany and Italy have repatriated gold, signaling mistrust in global financial systems dominated by the dollar. Trade and aid leverage waning. EU trade preferences under AFCFTA face renegotiation as African states demand more autonomy. EU Commission report, June 2025. Migration politics. European Union summit in May 2025 discussed implementing visa regimes to curb African arrivals, sparking outrage among African Union leaders. Reuters, May 2025. Security spillover fears. Analysts warn that if hunger and instability worsen, extremist groups in the Sahel could expand, yet some say Western overstated the threat as justification for deeper intervention. Corporate interests and de-risking. Major Western banks withdrew financing for critical mineral projects. BlackRock warns of political risk, while private equity shifts to Asia. Financial Times analysis, June 2025. So how does Africa respond to Western pressure? Africa is not a passive actor. Through AFCFTA, Agenda 2063, and continental solidarity, Africans chart their own course. African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA will create a $3.4 trillion single market by 2030, boosting intra-Africa trade from 17% to 50% of total trade, World Bank report, April 2025. Agenda 2063 aspirations, key goal, 60% industrialization, universal health coverage, green energy transition, and reparatory justice, 2063 Australian dollars strategic framework. Digital transformation and sovereignty, African data sovereignty laws emerging, Pan-African cloud platforms to reduce reliance on Western tech giants, ITU Africa Digital Report 2025. Diaspora engagement, remittances hit $60 billion in 2024, outpacing FDI, new diaspora bonds and investment vehicles harness global African wealth, World Bank, April 2025. Join the debate. How can we support Africa's vision? Use hashtag #Africarising in your posts and tag us. Just as Africa's rising stars are grabbing global headlines, a silent crisis is unfolding. Massive USAID cuts are ripping vital lifelines away from millions across the continent. What happens when the world's largest aid donor pulls the plug? Let's break it down. By early 2025, U.S. foreign aid to Africa was slashed by roughly 20%, and remember, the U.S. once supplied over a quarter of all development assistance on the continent. Models predict an extra 5.7 million Africans pushed into extreme poverty next year if the cuts stand. Spotlight, Ethiopia. Ethiopia alone lost more than $1.7 billion in USAID support, funds that underpin drought relief, malaria control, and refugee rations. The World Food Programme has already cut food rations by 40% for 800,000 refugees, and over 7 million malaria treatments went unfunded. Spotlight, Democratic Republic of the Congo. In the DRC, USAID's malaria program budget dropped by an estimated 47%. Health officials warn that cuts to disease surveillance and drug distribution are already costing lives, undermining both Congolese communities and global health security. Spotlight, Madagascar and beyond. Madagascar saw a 90-day freeze on all USAID projects in January 2025, stalling environmental conservation, clean water schemes, and school building plans. Similar halts at Kenya, Uganda, Mozambique, and South Sudan, leaving infrastructure half-built and communities stranded. Some African leaders argue these cuts will spark homegrown solutions, new sin taxes funding health, public-private partnerships for water and power, and Pan-African Development Bank stepping up. Critics counter that abrupt aid withdrawal reverses decades of progress, risks more disease outbreaks, higher child mortality, and fuels migration and instability in fragile states. Looking ahead to 2030, will Africa's continental free trade area spark the next industrial revolution, or stall under debt burdens? Will there be a tech-powered, Pan-African consortium challenging Silicon Valley and Shenzhen shoulder to shoulder? Or will it be a fragmented continent, weighed down by external debts and security rackets? Which path unfolds depends on today's choices: unity versus division, sovereignty versus dependency. Africa's rise is inevitable. Its choices, economic, political, technological, will shape not only the continent's destiny but the future of the global order. The West may be nervous, but history shows that power shifts are opportunities for renewal. Is Africa's rise a triumph of self-determination, or a new battleground for geopolitical rivalries? From startups to street protests, from Beijing's ports to Wagner's mercenaries, Africa's rising truly shakes the world order. The West is nervous because they know what a confident, united Africa can achieve. Now it's your turn. Join the global conversation, subscribe, ring that bell, and share this video with your network. Tell us, will Africa's future be written by its people, or by outside powers? If you found this debate enlightening, subscribe for more. Hit the bell icon to never miss an episode, and let us know, where do you stand in this debate? See you next time on Matt Knows. Thanks for watching. Africa is Rising, Why the West is Nervous. Until next time, stay informed, and stay engaged.